I used to believe that the quietest life was the safest one. No drama, no conflict, no surprises, just routine morning tea by the window, the same worn chair, the same view of the street I'd lived on for nearly 30 years. People came and went, seasons changed, but my life stayed steady, predictable, and I thought that meant secure. I was wrong, because the truth is, danger doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks in wearing familiar faces and sits at your table like family. My children had always been my pride. Every decision I made, every sacrifice I endured, it all traced back to them. Long nights, skipped luxuries, years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to them. And I never regretted it, not once, even when money was tight. Even when I had to patch the same pair of shoes 3 times instead of buying new ones. Even when I drove that old car, my car, long past the point anyone would call it reliable. To me, it wasn't just a car, it was proof. Proof that I'd made it through the hardest years. Proof that I could still stand on my own 2 feet. Proof that I wasn't a burden to anyone. I bought it secondhand years ago after saving quietly for nearly 18 months. Nothing fancy, faded paint, a slight rattle when you accelerated too fast. But it was mine, completely mine, and that mattered more than anything. I still remember the first day I drove it home. My hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly, my heart racing, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom, not the kind people talk about in big, dramatic ways. Not adventure or escape, just the simple, quiet kind, the kind that says, I can go where I want when I want without asking anyone. After everything I'd given up, that feeling was priceless. My children didn't understand that, at least not at first. Back then, they still saw me as strong, capable, independent, but time has a way of shifting how people see you, and sometimes how they treat you. It started small, it always does, little comments, harmless on the surface. You shouldn't be driving so much. That car isn't very safe anymore. Maybe it's time to think about something more practical. They said it with concern, soft voices, gentle smiles, and I believed them because they were my children, because I trusted them, because I wanted to believe that their worry came from love, not something else. Looking back now, I can see the difference. Concern asks, control suggests, and manipulation disguises itself as both. At the time, though, I brushed it off. Fine, I would say, with a small laugh. That car has more life in it than you think. They'd exchange glances sometimes, quick ones. The kind you only notice if you're paying attention. I wasn't, not yet. To me, everything still felt normal, safe, until the day it wasn't. It happened on an ordinary morning, which, in hindsight, feels almost cruel. Because nothing about that day looked like it was about to change my life. I woke up the same way, made my tea, watched the same stretch of road through the same window. Everything was exactly as it had always been, except it wasn't. I just didn't know it yet. I remember reaching for my keys, that small, familiar habit. I like to hold them sometimes, even if I wasn't going anywhere. A quiet reassurance. A reminder that I could, but they weren't where I left them. At first, I didn't think much of it. Misplacing things happens, especially when you live alone, so I checked the usual places. The table, the drawer, the hook by the door, nothing. A faint unease crept in, not panic. Not yet, just something slightly off, like a note in a song that doesn't quite sound right. I told myself I'd find them later. Instead, I stepped outside. And that's when everything shifted. The driveway was empty, completely empty. For a moment, my mind refused to process it. It just stalled. Because there are some things your brain doesn't expect to see. Or rather, not see. My car had been there the night before. I remembered it clearly. I had parked it carefully, as always. Locked it. Checked it twice. Routine, predictable, safe. So why wasn't it there? I stood there longer than I should have, just staring. As if looking hard enough would make it reappear. As if reality could be corrected through sheer will. But it didn't come back. And slowly, the confusion turned into something sharper, something colder. I went back inside. Checked again, keys, papers, anything. That's when I noticed the folder, the one I kept in the cabinet. Documents, registration, insurance, important things. It was slightly out of place, barely noticeable unless you knew exactly how it should look. I opened it. And that's when the unease turned into something else entirely. Some papers were missing, not all, just enough. Enough to make my chest tight, enough to make a thought form. When I didn't want to believe, I reached for my phone. My hands weren't shaking yet, but they felt heavier, like something inside me already knew what I was about to hear. My son answered first, cheerful, too cheerful. He said, like nothing was wrong, like everything was normal. And for a brief, fragile moment, I almost let myself believe it was. Where's my car? I asked, simple, direct. There was a pause, short, but not short enough. Oh, he said, as if he just remembered something minor. We were going to tell you. That word landed heavier than the silence before it. What do you mean? I asked, still calm, still holding on to the version of reality where this had a reasonable explanation. We sold it, he said, just like that, no buildup, no hesitation, no understanding of what those words meant to me, to everything I had built, to everything that car represented. For a second, I didn't breathe, not out of shock, but because my body simply forgot how. You, what? I said. Even as I spoke, part of me hoped I had misheard, that this was a misunderstanding, that there was still a version of this conversation where things made sense. But there wasn't. It was time, he continued. That car wasn't safe. We found a buyer. It's better this way. The word echoed in my mind. Better for who? Because it didn't feel better. It felt like something had been taken, not borrowed, not discussed, taken without asking, without permission, without even considering that it wasn't theirs to decide. And that's when the shift happened. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep. Something inside me, something quiet and patient, began to move. Because beneath the shock, beneath the disbelief, there was a question forming, a small one, but powerful. How did they sell something that didn't belong to them? I didn't ask it out loud, not yet, because something told me I needed to listen first, to let them talk, to let them believe I was still the same, still trusting, still unaware, still easy to control. But I wasn't. Not anymore. And as my son kept talking, explaining, justifying, brushing it all aside like it was nothing, I started to notice things, small things, the way his voice didn't quite match his words, the way he rushed certain parts and avoided others, the way confidence sat on the surface, but something underneath it felt incomplete, like a story told too quickly, like details skipped. And in that moment, something became very clear. They believed they had taken control. They believed this was done, final. But I wasn't so sure, because the more I listened, the more something didn't add up. And for the first time since stepping outside and seeing that empty driveway, I wasn't just confused. I was thinking. Carefully, quietly, and with a growing certainty that this wasn't over, not even close. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes after betrayal, not immediately. At first, it's noise, emotion, disbelief trying to catch up with reality, but then something settles. And when it does, you start seeing things you missed before. That's where I found myself, not shouting, not confronting, not reacting the way they probably expected, just quiet, listening, watching, thinking. Because the truth was, if I had reacted the way they imagined, angry, confused, emotional, they would have stayed careful, defensive, alert. Instead, I gave them something far more dangerous, silence. I guess if you think it was the right thing, I said that day on the phone, my voice steady, almost soft. There was a pause on the other end, not the same kind as before. This one was different, relief. I could hear it, feel it, like tension slipping out of a room. Yeah, my son said quickly. It really was. You'll thank us later. I didn't respond right away, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had too much. And I needed time to decide what mattered most. So instead, I let the moment pass, let them both believe that I had accepted it, that I was still the same person they thought I was, trusting, passive, easily guided. But inside, something had shifted completely. Because the question I hadn't asked out loud that day, it hadn't gone away. It had grown. How had they sold something that was theirs? That question became my starting point. And unlike before, I wasn't afraid of the answer. The next morning, I didn't reach for my keys. There was nothing to reach for. Instead, I went straight to the cabinet. The folder was still there, slightly out of place, like a quiet confession. I took it out slowly, carefully. This time, I wasn't just looking, I was searching every document, every page, every detail I had once filed away without a second thought. Registration, insurance, purchase agreement, receipts. And then I found it, not hidden, not buried, just overlooked. A single line small enough to miss if you weren't paying attention, important enough to change everything, my name. And only mine, registered owner, no secondary name, no shared rights, no authorization for transfer without my signature. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to be absolutely certain. They couldn't sell it, not legally, not without me. And I hadn't signed anything, not recently, not ever. A slow breath left my chest. Not relief, something sharper than that, control. For the first time since that empty driveway, I wasn't standing in confusion. I was standing on something solid, because whatever they had done, it wasn't complete. And more importantly, it wasn't protected. I closed the folder gently, almost carefully, as if the truth inside it needed to stay quiet just a little longer, because knowing something, using it, are two very different things. That's when I understood something else. This wasn't about proving them wrong, not yet. This was about letting them believe they were right, because people reveal more when they think they've already won. And my children, they thought this was over, that they had made the decision, taken control. solved a problem I didn't even know I had, so I let them. I didn't call back, didn't argue, didn't demand explanations. Instead, I did something they would never expect. I waited. Days passed, and in those days I listened more carefully than I ever had before. Phone calls, casual conversations, little updates they offered without being asked. Each one told me something, not directly, but enough. We got a good price. My daughter mentioned one afternoon like she was talking about groceries. Good price, not necessary, not safety, not concern, value. That buyer was lucky we acted fast, she added, almost laughing. Lucky. The word sat strangely in my mind, because luck only matters when something is uncertain. And suddenly I began to see the edges of their confidence. It wasn't solid. It was rushed, built quickly, held together by assumptions. And assumptions are fragile things. That's when I decided I needed someone else to look at this. Someone who didn't carry emotion into the situation. Someone who could see it clearly, legally. I hadn't spoken to a lawyer in years. Never needed to. My life had always been simple, straightforward. But this wasn't simple anymore. I wasn't willing to guess. The office was small, quiet, the kind of place that doesn't draw attention to itself, which in that moment felt exactly right. I sat across from him. Mr. Halden, I think his name, was watching as he flipped through the documents slowly, methodically. Unlike my children, he didn't rush, didn't assume, didn't fill silence with unnecessary words. He just read. And the longer he stayed quiet, the more certain I became. Finally, he looked up. "Did you sign anything authorizing the sale?" he asked. I said, simple, certain. He nodded once, then leaned back slightly. "Well," he said, almost casually, "then they didn't sell your car." I blinked, not because I didn't understand, but because of how simply he said it, like the situation wasn't complicated at all. "They transferred possession," he continued. "But ownership, that's still yours." The words settled into place, clear, precise, unavoidable. "They had no legal right to complete that transaction without your consent." There it was again. The thing they never asked for, the thing they assumed they didn't need. "What does that mean?" I asked quietly. He folded his hands. "It means the sale is invalid," he said. "And depending on how it was handled, there could be consequences. Consequences not just for them, but for everyone involved, the buyer, anyone who processed the paperwork, anyone who signed off without proper authorization. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a problem, a serious one." And suddenly the balance shifted. Because what they thought was done wasn't. What they thought was secure was exposed. And what they thought they controlled was slipping. I left the office differently than I entered, not heavier, not overwhelmed, but sharper, focused. Because now this wasn't just a question, it was a strategy. And strategies require patience, precision, timing. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat for a while, just thinking, not about revenge, not about anger, but about truth, about what this really meant. Because the car, as much as it mattered, wasn't the whole story. The real issue was something deeper: respect. Or rather, the absence of it. They hadn't just sold my car, they had decided I didn't matter in that decision, that my voice wasn't necessary, that my ownership was flexible. And that was something I couldn't ignore. But I also knew this: if I confronted them now, if I revealed everything I knew, they would react, defend, deny, maybe even try to fix it quietly. And that would end it too quickly, too cleanly. No, if I was going to do this, it had to be complete. They needed to understand. Not just that they were wrong, but that their assumptions had consequences, real ones. So I did the one thing that felt the most unnatural: I stayed quiet. And in that silence, they grew louder, more confident, more careless. And with every word they spoke, they gave me exactly what I needed. Because the truth was no longer hidden, it was unfolding, slowly, inevitably, and they didn't even realize it.